Hello and thanks for joining me for this special edition as Israel marks Holocaust Remembrance Day. As of this evening, local time, all shops, restaurants and bars have shut their doors in honour of the day and of the 6 million Jews murdered at the hands of the Nazi regime. In Jerusalem's Yad Vashem Holocaust Museum now, a ceremony is underway with a little while ago the Israeli President and Prime Minister speaking. Now, this year the remembrance ceremony is happening just as a new global report has been released showing that a 13% increase has happened in anti-Semitic attacks worldwide.
Anti-Semitism penetrates into the European leadership, and within that we are witnessing a huge number of anti-Semitic attacks in Britain and in France. A third of the Jews of Europe declare and say that they avoid Jewish events because they're afraid for their life. When a person writes about the Holocaust, he doesn't write the words, he fights the words, because there are no words to describe what the victims felt. When death was the norm and life was a miracle. This is what the survivor Elie Wiesel of Bedside Memory wrote, whose books reflect the victory of the human spirit over the depths of evil.
Holocaust Remembrance Day is not only about preserving the memory of that past tragedy, but rededicating to the present-day fight against the prejudice that made it happen. This year, that mission is especially crucial amidst a global rise in anti-Semitism. Our international affairs correspondent Owen Alterman reports on a new study that makes clear the growing dimensions of that challenge.
What may be the main annual report tracking anti-Semitism was released Wednesday morning at a press conference in Tel Aviv. And the findings? The situation is bad. One finding by the Tel Aviv University's Kantor Center for the Study of Contemporary European Jewry and the European Jewish Congress, a 13% increase worldwide in violent anti-Semitic incidents. But no less important to the editors of the survey was this. The atmosphere surrounding anti-Semitism is bad, as shown by numerous studies, surveying Jews themselves and asking them how they feel, how safe they feel, and how comfortable they feel in their societies. After the press conference, we caught up with Dina Porat, the head of the Kantor Center, and asked her which one country gives her most concern.
Well, I would hate to pinpoint a country. I can reflect the feeling of Jews, not mine. I would say that the most extreme the most painful call came from France, where the Ministry of the Interior and the security organ of the community not only said ça suffit, enough is enough, but said that anti-Semitism has become a quotidian phenomenon, and there isn't a day that passes by without an anti-Semitic case.
We also asked Dina Porat how the Israeli government is doing in the fight of anti-Semitism and whether it's stepping up to the task.
Today, the government is more aware, more concerned. I think a few days ago, Netanyahu said he would convene a forum, an emergency forum, to deal with the problem. We gave the government the catalog of combating anti-Semitism. And the government has appointed, both in the Ministry of the Diaspora and both in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, there are small but important departments to combat anti-Semitism.
Yet another bleak report on the state of anti-Semitism worldwide, but also a few hopeful notes on the steps taken by governments abroad and the government here in Israel. Owen Alterman, I-24 News, Tel Aviv.
Meanwhile, our correspondent Daniel Semark has been at a Holocaust survivors event in Tel Aviv and filed this report.
Marching for Life. That's the name of one of the first events to start Israel's Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's an event that was organized by an organization called Spring for Holocaust Survivors. Now, their goal is to raise awareness about those still living Holocaust survivors, of which there are some 200,000. Not only to raise awareness, but also to show solidarity, that even the young population, which there were hundreds that arrived here today, young kids still in school, members of Israeli scouts, also Israeli parliament members came, even foreign diplomats, not least of which was a German ambassador. They spoke about the rising anti-Semitism in Europe and the need maybe this year more than ever to show awareness for this cause and to remember those still living from the tragedy that happened those decades ago in the not too distant past. Daniel Tzemach, I-24 News, Tel Aviv.
Tomorrow, May the 2nd, marks the Holocaust Memorial Day observed in Israel and around the world. This year, more than 10,000 people from 40 countries and dozens of dignitaries from around the world will participate in the 31st Annual International March of the Living, the 3-kilometre march from Auschwitz to Birkenau to pay tribute to all victims of the Holocaust. US Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, is set to head the delegation of US ambassadors joining the march. Let's go now to our European correspondent, Polina Garayev, who's in Krakow, Poland, to cover the March of the Living 2019. Polina, thank you for being with us tonight. Firstly, tell me what is expected with this march tomorrow?
Well, we have 10,000 participants this year representing more than 40 countries, and they're expected to gather in Auschwitz, the part that was used as a concentration camp in the early hours of the morning. From there, they will embark on a short journey of about 3 kilometers along the path that connects it to the death camp Birkenau, where there will be a ceremony held. Is this year also paying special attention to the Greek Jewry that was almost entirely annihilated during the Holocaust, and a large portion of it was sent to Auschwitz. Particularly the Jews of Saloniki were then forced in Auschwitz to serve as the Sonderkommando. They were in charge of disposing of the remains found in the crematorium, found in the gas chambers, and their memory will be particularly commemorated in the ceremony tomorrow. This will be the highlight of a week-long trip for many of the delegations who arrived in Poland already on Sunday, on Monday, and toured the country, visiting Warsaw, visiting other concentration camp, and also the city of Krakow that you see here behind me, visiting all the Jewish sites here, because Krakow was the site of also a very big Jewish community that sadly no longer exists here.
And Polina, just briefly, Holocaust Remembrance Day this year is being marked in the midst of a rising anti-Semitic sentiment in Europe and, of course, around the world. So tell me, how is this sentiment being addressed?
Well, earlier today, young Jewish leaders gathered in order to discuss exactly what you're suggesting, the fact that the anti-Semitism was on the rise and it wasn't eradicated in the decades since the Holocaust. So they will launch a social media campaign with the hashtag Say No to Anti-Semitism. They will read a declaration that they drafted tomorrow during the ceremony.
Yes.
And it's very symbolic that they are now the ones in charge of commemoration, especially as the survivors themselves that accompanied this journey, march for many years, are now dying off.
Polina Garayev in Poland, thank you so much for that. And we're going out for a short break, but when we get back, violent protests in France as union workers and yellow vest demonstrators take to the streets for May Day. We'll have all of the latest on that and plenty more right after this. Stay with us.
Go beyond the headlines every day on I-24 News. Host Ami Kaufman talks to the news makers and pundits to bring you the story behind the headlines.
Watch The Spin Room, Mondays and Thursdays, 4:05 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
The Middle East. I-24 News is a witness. Our journalists live and breathe there every day. Get all the latest global news from our studios in Tel Aviv, New York, Washington, and Paris. Anytime, anywhere. Download the I-24 News app, available on Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple, and Google stores. I-24 News, see beyond.
IT Center is an IT software and consulting company that develops and supplies communication and security solutions for the service provider industry. Voices is our unified communications collection of products with a groundbreaking hybrid architecture that grants flexibility and virtually unlimited control. From standard maintenance and support to specialized consulting, our offer can be customized to serve any size of organization. Working with us brings efficiency to all your communications. Every day, everywhere, everything connected.
I'm Michelle McCrory on I-24 News. Join me on Clear Cut, where we cut to the chase with a straightforward yet insightful breakdown of the world's top political and economic stories.
Weeknights beginning at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on I-24 News.
Thanks for staying with me for this special edition as Israel marks Holocaust Remembrance Day. Now, in the Holocaust, some people risked everything to keep Jews safe from the Nazi genocide. To mark Holocaust Remembrance Day, B'nai B'rith is hosting a special ceremony to honour those wartime rescuers. Anush and Shifra Werber helped to save around 3,000 children as part of the underground Belgian Jewish resistance. Eilon Levy brings that story.
Don't escape a second time, because the first place that they will come to look is here, and you will put the children in danger.
Michel and David were hidden children, both survivors of the Holocaust in Belgium. Michel, the son of Belgian resistance members who helped save thousands of Jewish children, including David.
They didn't think to help to save themselves. They wanted to help the others.
When the Nazis invaded Belgium, Anush and Shifra Werber fled to France and promptly came back.
The danger was well known if one read Hitler's Mein Kampf. He didn't think a leader, a political leader, should live and save his skin when it was his duty to lead his people that he left behind momentarily.
Anush and Shifra were active in Secours Mutuel, a Jewish aid organization. He printed a Yiddish paper with coded messages. She began hiding children. In September 1942, they joined the Comité de Défense des Juifs, the Committee for the Defense of the Jews. David Inovloki was 1 year old when the war broke out. His father fled to France. When the Nazis circumvented the Maginot Line, his life was saved thanks to a stark warning from a communist survivor of Dachau.
I was walking, and a German car, a military car, stopped, and the officer looked to my father and said to him, "Wohin gehen Sie? Where are you going?" My father said, "Antwerp." He looked to him, he said, "Rhein." Took him in. And the driver turned back to my father and told him, "You are Jew?" My father said, "Yes. Hide yourself as soon as you are home, as deep as one even couldn't see your shadow."
David's father urgently moved the family out of Antwerp. By now, the CDG was busy moving Jewish children around the country, a complex operation.
You had to provide money in the hiding place, so you had to visit them again. It was not permitted to the parents to go there.
Shifra Werber stored the children's details in 5 separate books to keep them safe in case the records fell into the wrong hands.
There was the original name of the children. There was where the contact with parents, where they were hidden, and so on and so on.
When a strange woman turned up to take the Inavloki children, their mother refused.
So she couldn't leave the children, let go the children without knowing who the lady that came to fetch us was really. She didn't know. It was a secret. And nor the place where we had to go. And she didn't know she would see us again. We were crying, all of us were crying. And I remember still my mother saying to me, before we left, to my brother and me, don't forget you are Jews. Don't forget you have a sister. And also, don't look to the Germans straight in their eyes.
But on the way to a convent in Charleroi, where they were first hidden, David was ordered to memorize his false Belgian name.
And she said, your parents are dead in a bombing in Antwerp, and you are Catholics. We didn't tell we were Jews. We hid everything. We went to church at 6:30, I think, each morning, and I did like the others. I was like a monkey. I did also my cross. You learn it very quickly.
Michel was also hidden with a Christian family, and sometimes he still fantasizes about being back with his beloved Maman Louise.
I still consider her as my mother as well. Not that I want to be Catholic, but I didn't feel all the time Jewish, as if I would have stayed home during the war.
The rescue of Belgium's Jewish children is a mighty legacy, which Michel and David have researched to keep the story in the history books.
I feel proud of them, mainly proud of them, and I really had to fight very hard to have people recognize their role.
And this is something formidable.
There are many unique ways in which descendants of Holocaust survivors can pay tribute to survivors and victims of Nazis. Israeli athlete Rani Geva chose to do it by hiking through the mountains of Poland and Slovakia, reenacting the escape route used by his grandparents fleeing the Nazis. More in the next report.
We are all born into a family with a particular history and background scenery that can accompany us throughout our lives. Rani Geva was raised on the World War II stories of his grandfather, Uziel Lichtenberg, a Polish Jew who fled the Nazis and returned to save fellow Jews.
During
World War II, Grandpa fought in the Polish army against the Nazis. He was captured but managed to escape. He then returned to his town of Lodz. There he was told the SS was after him for his anti-Hitler activities. He then fled to Warsaw and volunteered in the underground movement in opening an escape passage for Jews from Poland through the mountains of Slovakia.
Uziel Lichtenberg and the Zionist underground movement led Jews out of Poland through the Tatra Mountains into Slovakia, providing them with fake documents and cash to secure their escape from Europe. Lichtenberg and his wife Bluma lived with fake documents in Budapest while they carried out missions for the underground movement, until he was arrested and sent to prison, suspected of being a spy. After being released from prison in 1944, Lichtenberg made the journey to Palestine, where he settled and built a family. Rani Geva works as a holistic healer and physical therapist. He believes that returning to traumatic places with a positive mindset can help heal the wounds.
Grandpa died in February of last year. A few months after he died, I started reading Haruki Murakami's What I Talk About When I Talk About Running. The book inspired me to run an ultra-marathon, and it gave me an idea to go on this journey to honor my grandfather by running the same path he took through the mountains escaping the Nazis in Poland into Slovakia.
In the case of descendants of Holocaust survivors, the background story tends to be a mystery or open to discussion with traumatic information.
These journeys can help people connect to a root deeper inside of them, to understand where they come from, to return to these places today as an athlete and run and pay tribute to what your family went through from life, closing the circle.
The 43-mile journey through the mountains wasn't easy. But after long hours of effort and meditation, the mission was accomplished. Homage to his late grandparents was paid. Daniel Campos, I-24 News.
OK, now let's move to some of today's news. And riots took place in Paris today on May Day, with thousands of people using the occasion to protest against President Emmanuel Macron's policies, with police firing tear gas to push back demonstrators. Labour unions, along with many from the Yellow Vest movement, taking to the streets across France days after Macron responded to months of protests announcing tax cuts worth around $5.6 billion. Today's riots have injured several people, with police there on high alert still. Now, as I mentioned, today is International Workers' Day, originally a Communist Solidarity Day that has internationally become synonymous with left-wing politics. But here in Israel, only handfuls of teenagers marched through the streets, where thousands did decades ago. But why did solidarity die in Israel? I-24 News reporter Ariel Levin-Waldman has more.
May 1st, International Workers' Day has a long past in Israel. It just doesn't have a present.
Most of the people in Israel doesn't see it as relevant, and sometimes see it as anachronistic and even resentment to this day.
How did an international communist holiday once draw thousands into the streets? And why are those days a forgotten memory now?
It's about politics, because those days you are talking about the 50s and the 60s and the 70s, when Mapai, when the Labour Party was the ruler.
Israel's founding Zionist movement exalted labor. The kibbutz was a national symbol, and the Labor Party and union workforces dominated public life. But Israel's then socialist economy began to collapse when the right wing took power in 1977, in part due to a large influx of Jewish immigrants from the Arab world who did not share in socialist ideals. And as Israelis became more affluent, Labor Day parades drew fewer and fewer enthusiasts. Eventually, Israel's labor unions admitted defeat and stopped holding May Day events entirely. But Israel's left hasn't abandoned the day.
In order to commemorate May Day, International Workers' Day, we went out to 14 different train stations across Israel to raise awareness and to picket in support of the union of the train workers, which is under attack by the government.
Israel's right-wing government under Benjamin Netanyahu has been very successful at deregulating and liberalizing the economy. The capitalist ideals have been very good at generating wealth. But labor activists say it has left a lot of sectors behind.
Israel is one of the leading countries among OECD countries in terms of child poverty, in terms of poverty among the elderly, in terms of poverty among the disabled. The wages in Israel, in comparison to the standard of living, to the price index, are very low. So May Day is now more important than ever.
Around the world, many states still have huge May Day parades, France and Russia being notable examples. But Israel isn't one of them, and that's likely to stay the case. Ariel Levin-Waldman, I-24 News.
Now to the US, where Attorney General William Barr is testifying before the Senate Judiciary Committee today in a highly anticipated hearing on the Mueller report. Barr's facing questions about his decisions in the days after Special Counsel Robert Mueller submitted his report to the Attorney General and the 4-page characterization of the report to Congress, which has led to an outcry among Democrats who allege that Barr's summary has misled the American public.
On Thursday morning, I received, it probably was received at the department Wednesday night or evening, but on Thursday morning I received a letter from Bob, the letter that's just been put into the record. And I called Bob and said, what's the issue here? And I asked him if he was suggesting that the March 24th letter was inaccurate, and he said no, but that the press reporting had been inaccurate.
Now to Venezuela, where US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo has come out to say that America is prepared to take military action in the Latin American country, but adding the US would prefer a peaceful transition of power from President Nicolas Maduro to self-declared leader Juan Guaido. This after a failed coup attempt by Guaido yesterday. Speaking in a televised appeal to the nation, Maduro said that the army had defeated the conspirators. Guaido calling on the military to help him oust President Maduro, urging his supporters on social media to take to the streets once again today. Now to sport, and Porto goalie Iker Casillas is in a stable condition in hospital after having a heart attack during training. The 37-year-old Spaniard, who's currently being monitored by medical staff, has won 3 Champions League titles along with 5 titles in La Liga for Real Madrid. Casillas was also part of the national squad, which won 2 successive European Championships in 2008, 2012 and the World Cup back in 2010. And that is all we have time for this edition of I24 News, but we are keeping you up to date with all of the breaking stories, so visit us online, that's i24news.tv, and of course on all of our social media platforms. I'm Sarah Coates. Thanks for watching.